Some betrayals don't come with warning signs. They hit you like a punch in the ribs, leaving you breathless and staring at the pieces of a life you thought you had under control. For me, that moment happened on a freezing Saturday morning in the mountains when I opened my business account and saw a row of zeros where my savings used to be. My name is Rebecca Quinn. I'm 34 years old and I live in Seattle. For the past 10 years, I've poured every drop of my energy into building an art gallery that champions eco-conscious artists. I started with a tiny rented storefront and a handful of local painters. Back then, I barely scraped enough each month to pay rent and utilities. I ate canned soup for weeks, patched my own jeans, and turned my studio into both a showroom and a makeshift apartment. But I believed in it. Every sale, every show felt like a small victory I earned with my own hands. Lena, my younger sister, couldn't have been more different. She's always been the wild spirit. The one who backpacked through Europe on a whim and spent entire summers chasing music festivals. When our parents died in a fire, we each inherited a small insurance settlement. I put every cent into my gallery, and Lena drifted until she met Marco. I've never trusted him. Marco has that polished, smug kind of charm that hides something rotten underneath. He calls himself a financier, but I've never once seen any proof of a real job. He drives flashy cars, always has some vague story about his next big opportunity, and looks at me like I'm some charity case for not playing the corporate game. Last week, we agreed on a family weekend at a chalet up near Stevens Pass. It was supposed to be simple, a little break before the holiday rush. The first night was full of laughter and clinking glasses. Lena was radiant in that way she gets when she's around Marco, though her smiles didn't quite reach her eyes. My parents' old friend Nora and her husband joined us too. We made a fire, drank wine, and for a few hours, it felt like a family gathering instead of something laced with tension. That illusion shattered the next morning. I woke up early to check on an online sale, just a habit I can't shake. When I logged into my business account, my breath caught. The balance, over $120,000 I'd painstakingly saved, was gone. Transferred out in one series of transactions, all made overnight. My coffee cup trembled in my hand as I stared at the screen, refreshing it over and over, hoping I was seeing it wrong. I wasn't. At first, I thought it was some kind of bank error. Then I checked the activity log. The withdrawals were made through my own laptop, using my credentials. My chest tightened. No one besides me should have had access to that computer. I had brought it along on the trip, left it on the small desk in my room. I remembered closing it before heading to bed after midnight. The realization hit me like ice water. The only people in that chalet were family. Someone I trusted enough to share a roof with had stolen everything I had built. Every ounce of instinct in me pointed to Marco. He's made plenty of snide comments about my little gallery and how I play business with recycled art. He's the type who sees people like me as naive. But knowing he could actually do something like this, take everything I've bled for, made my skin crawl. I sat there in that creaky wooden chair, numb, while the smell of breakfast drifted up from the kitchen. My mind reeled with the memory of all the nights I stayed up till 2, framing artwork by hand, begging local coffee shops to hang my pieces, cutting every corner just to keep the doors open. That money wasn't just cash, it was 10 years of my life. 10 years of grit and stubbornness and sacrifice. I wanted to storm downstairs and scream, but I didn't. Not yet. I needed to be sure, and I needed to control my fury. Because if Marco was behind this, I knew one thing. I wasn't about to let him win. By the time I came downstairs, my hands were still shaking. The smell of pancakes and coffee filled the chalet, but it didn't feel like breakfast anymore. It felt like a stage. Lena was standing by the window, her hair messy from sleep, while Marco sat at the table scrolling through his phone like he owned the place. I set my laptop down and cleared my throat. Someone wiped my business accounts clean last night. All of it, over $120,000 gone. The room froze. Nora's fork clattered onto her plate. Her husband, Carl, stopped mid-sip of his coffee. Lena turned, her face pale, eyes flicking toward Marco for a beat before landing back on me. What? Are you serious? She asked, voice tight. Dead serious, I said, pulling out the screen capture I'd printed earlier. It was done using my own laptop while I was asleep. Marco didn't even look up. He kept scrolling, his lips curled in something that almost looked like a smirk. That tiny expression was all I needed to see. I walked closer. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Marco? He finally set his phone down, leaning back in his chair like this was all just some boring story he had to tolerate. Why would I know anything about your little gallery funds? I have my own business to run. I took a step forward, locking eyes with him. My laptop was moved. Security software shows a failed login attempt at 2 in the morning. Someone tried to guess my password. You want to tell me who else here even cares enough to get into my accounts? Nora's eyes darted between us, wide and uneasy. Carl muttered something under his breath, but no one spoke up. Lena's face stayed stiff, like she was caught between two fires. She didn't defend him. She didn't even look at me. Marco chuckled, low and condescending. Maybe you should be thanking whoever took it. At least someone's putting that money to better use. EcoArt? Please. You've been playing at business for years, Rebecca. Maybe it's time someone showed you how real success works. The words burned hotter than the fire crackling in the hearth. He stood, deliberately brushing past me with that smug half-smile that made me want to throw something. We all have to take care of our families, right? He added, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. Lena flinched but said nothing. Her silence hurt worse than Marco's taunts. I wanted her to look me in the eye, to tell me I was wrong, that Marco wasn't the kind of man who would rip apart my life. But she just stood there, arms folded, staring at the floor. I took a slow breath, forcing steel into my voice. Fine, I said, stepping toward the doorway where Marco had just disappeared. But don't be surprised by what happens next. I didn't shout it. I didn't need to. The weight of my words left the kitchen quieter than snow falling outside. I used to think Lena and I were just two sides of the same coin. Growing up in Spokane, our parents ran a small auto repair shop. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept food on the table. Dad would come home smelling of engine oil. And Mom always had grit under her nails from helping him in the garage. I spent my teenage years in that shop, sorting parts, answering phones, and learning to patch up rusted bumpers. Lena? She was usually off somewhere chasing the next thrill. While I was sweating in overalls, she'd be sprawled in the grass listening to bands no one had heard of, already dreaming about music festivals and trips she couldn't afford. It wasn't that she was lazy. She just lived on a different wavelength, like rules and plans were weights she refused to carry. When our parents died in that fire, everything changed overnight. I was 22, Lena barely 19. We sat in the lawyer's office, shell-shocked, while he explained the insurance settlement. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a fresh start. I put every cent into what would eventually become my gallery. Painted walls, cheap shelving, and one borrowed couch to make the space feel alive. Lena, though, didn't have a plan. She floated. A trip to Mexico, a new boyfriend in Portland, a stint working at a vegan cafe that lasted 3 weeks. For a while, I tried to guide her. I'd call and remind her to pay rent or send her money when she overspent on plane tickets. She'd laugh it off, promising to figure it out. Then Marco appeared. The first time I met him, he pulled into my gallery's parking lot in a shiny European car that looked like it belonged in a commercial. He shook my hand with the kind of grip that's supposed to feel strong but just comes off rehearsed. So this is the little gallery, he said with a smirk, glancing around like he was in a thrift store. Lena lit up around him though. I watched her transform into someone I barely recognized. Quieter, more hesitant, like she needed his approval before she could speak. Marco would toss out comments like, "Art's cute as a hobby, but real money's in the markets," and Lena would giggle nervously, even when I was standing right there. I told myself to ignore it, to stay polite for her sake, but something about him never sat right with me. After they married, Lena drifted even further. She stopped calling as much, and when she did, Marco was always in the background, correcting her or mocking me in that fake friendly tone. "Your sister's still playing with paintings?" he'd ask, like my years of struggle were nothing more than a pastime. I tried not to let it get under my skin, but it did. Not because I cared what he thought, I knew what I'd built, but because I could see what he was doing to her. She'd gone from this free-spirited dreamer to someone who barely voiced her own opinions. When I'd visit, she'd flinch if he teased her in front of me, then shrug it off like it was normal. I wanted to shake her and tell her she was worth more than this. But I knew Lena. Push too hard, and she'd only dig in deeper. So I stayed watchful, keeping my distance while quietly waiting for the day she'd realize Marco wasn't the savior he pretended to be. That day, I realized, might have already come, and not in the way I'd hoped. That night, while the others were laughing downstairs over wine, I stayed in my room, staring at my laptop like it might confess what had happened. Something about the way it sat on the desk made my skin crawl. The lid was slightly off-center, as if someone had closed it in a hurry. My own fingerprints were faint on the touchpad, but there was a smudge, different size, different angle. That wasn't mine. I powered it on and went straight to my security logs. My gallery's financial software had a built-in alert system I rarely thought about, but now every tiny detail seemed critical. The activity log showed a failed login attempt at 2:03 a.m., followed by a successful one 5 minutes later. My heart sank. Whoever had done this had been in the room while I was asleep. I opened the security app I'd installed last year, mostly for peace of mind. The built-in camera had captured a blurry, shadowy figure. The photo wasn't crystal clear, but the broad shoulders and slicked back hair made me think of only one person. Marco. I changed every password I could think of: bank accounts, business emails, even my social media. My fingers shook as I typed, but my mind was sharpening into something fierce. I called my cybersecurity contact, a woman named Layla who had helped me after a phishing attempt last year. She answered groggily, but snapped to attention when I explained. "Don't panic," she said firmly. "We'll trace it. Start by locking down your accounts and pulling all transaction logs. I'll set up a trace for the transfer location. If they used your laptop, there's a footprint." Within the hour, I'd gathered enough screenshots and timestamps to build a digital map of what had happened. My business partner, Daniel, confirmed my worst fear when I called him. A major payment we'd been expecting for an upcoming exhibition had already bounced because the account was drained. "Becca, this is serious," he said quietly. "We need to file a fraud report first thing tomorrow." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I'm already on it," I said. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the bed, my jaw tight. Marco's smug dismissal earlier played on a loop in my head. He wasn't just arrogant, he was bold enough to think I'd do nothing. Maybe he assumed Lena's loyalty would paralyze me. Maybe he thought I'd let it slide to avoid embarrassing her. Not this time. I gathered the evidence into a folder on my desktop, labeling it for police. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The kind that comes when fear burns off and leaves only resolve. I would not only get my money back, I would make sure Marco regretted ever touching my laptop. I closed the lid gently, almost ceremoniously, and whispered to the empty room, "You won't see me coming." The next morning, I walked into the breakfast room like someone marching to a battlefield. My skin felt cold despite the fire burning in the stone hearth. They were all there. Lena at the far end of the table, eyes rimmed red from a sleepless night. Nora and Carl murmuring over their plates. And Marco, leaning back in his chair, looking as if he'd already won something. "Stop eating," I said, my voice flat. The chatter died instantly. Even the fork stilled. $120,000 has been stolen from my business accounts. Transferred through my own laptop. Last night. A gasp from Nora. Carl muttered, "That's insane," while Lena's hands twisted in her lap. But Marco? He just smirked, like he'd been waiting for a chance to perform. "Is this a public service announcement, Rebecca?" he asked lazily. "Or are you accusing someone?" I walked to the center of the room, placing a printed screenshot of the account transfers on the table. "I'm accusing the person who accessed my laptop at 2 in the morning. The same laptop I locked in my room. Care to explain, Marco?" His smirk widened. "Why would I waste my time with your charity business? Maybe you just mismanaged it. Happens all the time with passion projects." I stepped closer, my voice like ice. "You touched my laptop. You triggered a failed login attempt, and I have the log to prove it." Marco laughed, an actual laugh, as if this was all entertainment. "You really think anyone cares about your recycled art boutique? Let me guess, that money was for another batch of ugly furniture made from driftwood? We made better use of it than you ever could." The words hit like a slap, but I refused to flinch. Nora let out a shocked Marco, while Carl shook his head in disbelief. Lena's lips parted, but no defense came. Her silence cut deeper than his sneer. I leaned across the table, close enough to see the smug glint in his eyes. Better use of it? You stole from me. Marco stood, towering over me with a mock grin. Don't act like a victim. You'll get over it. People like me know how to make money work. You should be thanking me. Thanking you, I repeated, my voice sharp and low. For gutting 10 years of my life's work? He gave a slow shrug, like a man swatting away a fly. You'll recover. If not, well, maybe it's time you get a real job. That was it, the last straw. I straightened, feeling a rush of calm determination. Then don't be surprised by what happens next. He frowned slightly, as if trying to read me. But I didn't give him time. I turned to Lena, who looked as if she might cry, and then to Nora and Carl. You all heard him. Remember this moment. As I walked out of the room, the silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was electric, like everyone sensed something was about to shatter. It was still early when I heard the crunch of tires on the snow-packed driveway. The sound cut through the chalet like a blade. I set my mug down, calm but alert. A knock followed, firm and official. Marco, still in his robe, glanced toward the window. Expecting someone? He asked with a mocking grin. Yes, I said evenly. I am. When I opened the door, 2 uniformed officers stood flanking a woman in a dark coat, her badge clipped to the collar. Rebecca Quinn? She asked. Yes, I replied. I'm Detective Laura Donovan. We have a warrant related to the reported theft from your business accounts. May we come in? The room went silent. Nora's fork froze midair, and Lena's face drained of color. Marco smirked like it was all some elaborate joke. You called the cops? He said, half laughing. Yes, I answered. I told you not to be surprised. Detective Donovan entered, holding a folder thick with paperwork. We've confirmed the transfer path, she said, addressing the room. The funds were moved from Ms. Quinn's accounts using her personal laptop. We traced the IP address and login data, as well as biometric snapshots from the device camera. It all points to one user, Marco Alvarez. Marco's grin vanished. That's ridiculous, he snapped, stepping forward. You think I'd leave a trail that obvious? This is a setup. Detective Donovan opened the folder, pulling out color-printed photos. This is you, taken by the built-in camera at 2:08 a.m. attempting multiple password entries. And these are the logs of the transfers to a cryptocurrency wallet linked to your personal email. Marco's jaw tightened, but he still tried to bluff. You can't prove She can. I cut in, sliding my own folder onto the table. This contains every timestamp, every alert from my security software, and a bank report confirming unauthorized transfers. I gave the police remote access as soon as I saw the funds disappear. The officers moved closer. Sir, we need you to step aside, one of them said firmly. Marco's face twisted. You're ruining your own family over a misunderstanding. He lunged at me, but the officers grabbed his arms before he could get close. Lena let out a sharp cry. Stop it, Marco. Her voice breaking in a way I hadn't heard in years. Ma'am, please step back, one officer said, guiding Lena away as they restrained her husband. Marco's bravado cracked, and he started shouting curses, pulling against their grip. Detective Donovan addressed me. We'll be holding him for questioning. With the evidence you've provided, I don't think this will take long. I handed her the USB drive I'd prepared. Everything you need is on here. Screenshots, device IDs, even the photo from the camera. Good work, she said with a small nod before turning to the officers. Take him. They led Marco out the front door, his protests growing fainter until the door slammed behind them. For a moment, the chalet was utterly still. Lena stood trembling, her hands over her mouth, as if she'd just woken from a nightmare. He did it, didn't he? She whispered. I nodded. Yes. And now it's over. She looked at me with wide, tearful eyes. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't want to see it. I stepped closer, touching her arm gently. You don't have to defend him anymore. For the first time that weekend, Lena didn't look like she might break. She just closed her eyes and whispered, Thank you. as if I'd pulled her out of deep water. 3 weeks later, I stood inside my new gallery space in Tacoma, sunlight spilling across the polished concrete floor. The walls were fresh white, waiting for the first exhibit to be hung. Just a month ago, I thought I might lose everything. Now, with the bank recovering most of the stolen funds and fraud insurance covering the rest, it felt like I'd stepped out of a storm and into calm, steady air. Lena moved in with me after Marco's arrest. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a hollow look that broke my heart. The first few days she barely spoke. She'd spend hours sitting at the kitchen table, wrapping her hands around a mug like it was the only warm thing in her life. But slowly something shifted. She started helping me cook dinner, pulling out Mom's old handwritten recipe cards from the shoebox I'd kept all these years. We'd make her favorite lemon chicken, laughing about how we always burned it as kids. Cooking became our therapy, chopping, tasting, remembering. One night, while we were rolling out pie crust for an upcoming gallery opening, she finally opened up. "I don't even know who I was with him," Lena said, voice trembling. "He made me feel small all the time. Like I should be grateful he chose me." I set down the rolling pin and looked at her. "Lena, he wanted you quiet and unsure because it made him feel bigger. But you're not that girl. You're stronger than he ever let you believe." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a shaky smile appearing. "You were brave, Rebecca. Brave for protecting your dream. I want to be brave enough to protect myself now." True to her word, Lena enrolled in a local culinary arts program 2 days later. The first time she came home wearing her new chef's coat, her eyes lit up like I hadn't seen in years. "I felt like I belonged," she said, holding up her hands dusted in flour. The gallery's grand opening in Tacoma became a small celebration of both our recoveries. Daniel clinked glasses with me, grinning. "You're unstoppable," he said. I just laughed, watching Lena carry out a tray of cookies she'd baked for the event. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just fighting to survive. I was building something bigger, with my sister by my side, finally free of the weight that had been crushing her. The chalet looked different when we returned. Less like a place of betrayal, and more like a blank canvas waiting for new colors. It was Lena's idea to invite the family back, minus the toxic parts of it, to reclaim the space. "If we leave it as a memory of what he did," she said, "it wins." I couldn't argue with that. The weekend felt nothing like the last one. Instead of tension, there were paint cans lined up by the front door and brushes soaking in water. Nora brought cinnamon rolls, their warm smell filling the air while Carl fixed the broken porch light. Laughter bounced off the wooden beams where silence and fear once clung. Lena was everywhere, kneeling on the floor to scrub scuffs from the wood, singing off-key with a playlist of old songs we used to love. She looked free, lighter than I'd seen her in years. At one point, she was laughing so hard with our cousin Amy over a spilled can of green paint that I had to stop and just watch. It felt like seeing my little sister again, the one I used to protect. That night, we gathered around the long table with takeout containers spread between us. Someone suggested we make a pact, not the kind you say once and forget, but something real. "From now on, we lift each other up," Amy said, raising her glass. "No more exploiting or tearing down. We've had enough of that." We all agreed. Even Carl, who rarely spoke during family gatherings, said, "If we can't trust family, what's the point of any of it?" It was simple, but it stuck with me. Before sunrise the next morning, I stepped out onto the porch with my phone. The snow was glowing pale blue, and Lena's laughter drifted from inside, soft and real. I opened the camera and started recording a video journal. "If you've had to walk away from blood to protect your spirit," I said quietly, "know this, you're not alone. Sometimes family isn't about who shares your name. It's about who shows up when you're broken and helps you rebuild." I stopped recording and watched as Lena came out to hand me a cinnamon roll, her hands dusted with flour. She grinned, cheeks pink from the cold. "Come inside or you'll freeze." As I followed her back into the warmth of the chalet, I realized something. The money I fought to protect mattered, but not as much as this. The bond that had survived the fire, the years, and even Marco's poison. We weren't just sisters anymore. We were allies stronger than before. And for the first time in months, I felt whole.